And gentlemen, today is an important event, not just from a political perspective, but also from a tribute to a great lady, a true American who stood for democracy, freedom, and justice everywhere and globally. So it's my great pleasure as the chair of OIAC Advisory to start our program today with the tribute to late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee. We gather here today with a heavy heart to honor the memory of a remarkable leader, a tireless advocate, and a true champion of justice, and that is Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee. Her passing leaves an immense void, not only in the chambers of Congress, but also in hearts of countless individuals whose lives have been touched through her unwavering dedication to human rights, equality, especially women's rights. For over 3 decades, Sheila Jackson-Lee served the people of Texas, and I see members of the Iranian American community of Texas who joined us today in honoring her memory. And she really did everything she could in such a remarkable way, in such an unyielding spirit, an unshakable commitment for social justice, for human rights, and for women's rights. Her passion for advocacy knew no bounds, from championing the women's rights across the globe to leading charge, making Juneteenth a national holiday. That is the legacy that Sheila Jackson-Lee leaves for all of us. Sheila's voice was a beacon of hope for the oppressed, rallying a cry for marginalized and a steadfast shield against injustice, particularly for those of us in this room. We know what she's done for the issue of democracy and human rights in Iran. We know what she did when the plots were forged against the leaders of Iran's resistance, President-elect Maryam Rajavi, as she stood bravely calling her her sister in that moment. And that really became a moment that she continued to always call Maryam Rajavi her sister. Sheila's tenure in Congress was marked by her relentless pursuit of equity and a fierce dedication to her constituents. She held influential positions, and we all know what she's done in U.S. Congress. Her life's work has inspired countless individuals to continue to fight for freedom, justice, and democracy. Her advocacy against brutality and violence, her efforts to uplift the voices of the unheard. I remember especially on those days where we had to fight for the basic human rights of the residents of Camp Ashraf. And she continued that work until we were able to settle everyone in Ashraf 3, and even until the very last day of her life. We are so indebted to everything that she did for the Iranian community. We are so indebted for the legacy that she leaves behind. And we are so indebted for the example that she sets for other leaders in U.S. Congress. Let us honor her legacy by recommitting ourselves to the cause that she championed, to the cause that means a lot to a lot of us here in this room, which is a non-nuclear secular republic Iran. Let us work tirelessly to ensure that her vision of just and equitable society becomes a reality, not just here in America, but particularly in Iran. Sheila Jackson-Lee may no longer be among us, but she definitely lives through every one of us with her spirit, with her passion, with her unwavering commitment to justice, and it will forever guide us. May we all strive to embody the values of Sheila, and she continued to inspire many of us to fight for the principles that she was so passionate about. Rest in peace, our dear Sheila. We will miss you, but your legacy inspires all of us. Please join me in standing up in a moment of silence in celebrating Sheila's life, followed by a moment of applauding what she stood for. It's my great pleasure to introduce Chief of Staff for Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee. Lily, please join us and share your thoughts with us.
Thank you for having this tribute to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee. Her heart and her mind and her soul was all in for liberating people from poverty, from the lack of access to education, to freedom, and of course the ability to vote and to be heard, and to protect women and children, especially girls, around the world. I wanted to thank you for all that you've done to share your feelings with not only the people in this room, but with those who are able to view this. I shared the video stream with her family, and I know this brings them comfort to know how much their mother and the spouse of her husband did when she was here in Washington working as a member of Congress representing the 18th Congressional District of Texas. Her commitment to you was wholehearted and full. Every opportunity she had to be here with you, to advocate for you, to support you in your efforts, she did so. She would encourage you to continue in your struggle for freedom and democracy in a nuclear-free, secular Iran. The office is always there, will be there as the 18th Congressional District, representing the constituents. Many of you have residents or members who are in our district to serve constituent services and casework as we are needed. Thank you again for this kind, very thoughtful recognition of a member of Congress who brought everything she had to her work to help others. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lily. We will forever celebrate what Sheila stood for and continue to be inspired by her. And she will be missed, but she's in our hearts. So, ladies and gentlemen, we gather today for a very important congressional briefing. This briefing is not only about the initiatives of the U.S. members of U.S. Congress, but also discussion about the recent development in Iran's political landscape. My name is Ramesh Separat. I am the advisory chair of Organization of Iranian American Community, and it's my honor to moderate the event today and help with the discussion that we will have with our members of Congress, as well as our experts from the Iranian American leaders and the community members. We'll be welcoming the members of Congress as they join us to share their perspective on this historic bipartisan majority of House Resolution 1148 and share with us their perspective. And our speakers will also explore implications of the recent presidential elections in Iran, or I must say actually presidential selection by Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, which it marks really a historic low turnout and really demonstrate the pervasive sense of rejection of this regime in its entirety. But before we start, it's my great pleasure to introduce our first video message from Madam Maryam Rajavi, President-elect of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, as she will share her thoughts with the topics that would be part of our discussion this morning. Please join me in welcoming video message from Maryam Rajavi.
Honorable members of Congress, I appreciate the bipartisan initiative of the House of Representatives in presenting Resolution 1148. This is a valuable model for an effective policy against the mullahs regime that has become the biggest cause of war and crisis in the region and the world. A religious dictatorship that is known for its massacre by executing 30,000 political prisoners in 1988. I'm very grateful to Congressman Randy Weber, who initiated this resolution. I extend my greetings to Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, Chair of the Republican Conference in this House, and the Honorable Representatives Nancy Mace, Brad Sherman, Lance Godin, Raul Ruiz, and Mario Diaz-Balá. However, I cannot hide my deep sorrow over the loss of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee. She was one of the pioneers in supporting the Iranian resistance, my sister, dear old friend, and one of the first signatories of this resolution. I extend my condolences to Congress, the American people, and her family on the passing of this great woman, a true advocate for justice and human rights. She bravely stood against the regime, appeasement policy, and unjust labels against this resistance, and she defended the PMI members in Ashraf in the most difficult times. Her name and memory will remain forever in the hearts of freedom-loving people worldwide, especially among my compatriots in Iran. Dear friends, Resolution 1148 and your conference today are of great importance given the current situation in Iran. On one hand, the people and the resistance of Iran are engaged in a struggle to overthrow this regime. On the other hand, this regime is fueling war across the Middle East and beyond, including Europe, to overcome the crisis of its downfall. It is pursuing its nuclear bomb project at maximum speed and extending its arms of terror and crime to American soil. Since March, the people of Iran have boycotted 5 of the regime's elections. This was a major development. The Iranian people reject all kinds of dictatorships, both Shah and the mullahs. The evaluations made by the Iranian resistance indicate that 88% of the population refused to participate in the so-called presidential election. The regime's leader has acknowledged these boycotts. These boycotts clearly demonstrate the widespread desire of the Iranian people to overthrow the regime. Another decisive development is the expansion of resistance units in Iran. In May and June, leading up to the annual gathering of the Iranian resistance, these units carried out 20,000 activities across 31 provinces. Recently, those looking to justify appeasing this regime have turned their hopes to the regime's new president. However, the people of Iran have declared for years that the game of reformists against hardliners is over. The past 45 years have proven the resistance's position that this regime cannot make any reform, and no one in this regime has the will or ability to bring about change. The regime's new president is nothing but a puppet. He has described himself as being devoted to the supreme leader and seeking only to carry out Khamenei's plans. He takes pride in his past as a member of Basij and the Revolutionary Guard. However, more important are his recent statements before and after the sham election. He showed no desire to change Khamenei's 3 main policies: domestic repression, foreign aggression, and nuclear projects. In the past 2 weeks, he has quickly and openly assured proxy groups, including Hezbollah and the Houthi, that the regime will continue to support them as before. The regime has attempted to prevent unrest in Iran by provoking war in Gaza. It continuously sends weapons to its proxy groups through a corridor extending from Iran to Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. It frequently dispatches ships full of missiles and equipment to the Houthi. In such circumstances, 3 fundamental steps are essential for a correct policy to confront the Iranian regime. They include recognizing the struggle of the Iranian people to overthrow the regime and the right of Iranian youth to defend themselves against the Revolutionary Guards, activating the snapback mechanism under Security Council Resolution 2231, placing the regime under Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter as a serious threat to global peace and security. The NCRI wants to establish a democratic, free, non-nuclear republic based on the separation of religion and the state that is essential for peace and security in the region and tranquility throughout the world. I'm confident that with the determination of the Iranian people, we can, we must, and we will free Iran. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Maryam Rajavi. Ladies and gentlemen, it is very fitting to start our congressional briefing today with a member of Congress who actually set the tone of bipartisan majority over the last several Congress. The leader who has worked tirelessly on a bipartisan issue for a non-nuclear secular republic, Iran. Please help me welcome Congressman Tom McClintock.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. You know, for the last 6 years, a bipartisan majority of the United States House of Representatives has co-sponsored a resolution supporting the struggle of freedom-loving Iranians to restore the liberty, tolerance, and peace to their oppressed land. The latest legislation to do so is House Resolution 1148, expressing the determination of the representatives of the people of the United States to stand with the people of Iran. As the regime has become more aggressive and better funded, this cause has become more urgent. Iran's role in the attack on Israel makes it clear that this regime is not only a threat to its own people, but to the peace, freedom, and security of the world. With this regime on the brink of a nuclear capability, they've made no secret that they intend to use. The world is running out of time and running out of options to prevent a catastrophe of historic proportions. And now we have credible reports of an Iranian threat to assassinate a former president of the United States who is also the leading candidate to resume that office in January. Such an attempt would constitute an act of war against the United States, requiring a total commitment of our armed forces. So the fight of the Iranian people is our fight. And I'm convinced that the only alternative to a costly and bloody conflict is the collapse and overthrow of that regime from within. The Iranian people realize this as well, and they know that the survival of Iran and the restoration of its freedom and prosperity depends on overthrowing this regime from within before the civilized nations of the world are required to act in their own defense. House Resolution 1148 acknowledges and upholds the Iranian people's inherent right to determine their political future as articulated in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Recognizing that the Iranian people have an organized resistance, this important resolution calls for holding the Iranian regime accountable for its actions through the continued imposition of sanctions and to support the Iranian Resistance 10-point plan for the future of Iran. With this resolution, a bipartisan majority in Congress urges the free world, given that the people of Iran have been deprived of all of their fundamental rights and political paths for change within the framework of international law and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to recognize the rights of the Iranian people, their protesters, and the resistance units to confront the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the repressive forces to bring about change. And finally, this resolution calls on the United States government, in cooperation with our ally, Albania, to ensure the full protection of the Iranian political refugees in Camp Ashraf III in Albania against the Iranian regime's plots and pressure for them to benefit from all rights stipulated in the Geneva Convention of 1951 and the European Convention on Human Rights. For years, this administration has released millions of dollars to the Iranian regime and allowed them to generate billions of dollars in oil revenues despite international sanctions. That nonsense has to stop now, and our government must provide not only the moral support, but the material support necessary to hasten the work of the Iranian resistance before it is too late to avert a war. Thank you all very much for being here today.
Congressman, thank you so much for outlining the specific points of the House resolution that has the bipartisan majority of U.S. Congress. And as always, you have been such a champion for the issue of non-nuclear secular republic in Iran. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our next member of Congress, a man who championed the House Resolution 1148, and that is none other than Congressman Weber. Please welcome Congressman Weber.
Howdy. Well, I got to get y'all some Texas stuff. Howdy. There we go. Man, I tell you what, this is the best crowd ever. And you know what that says? The movement is growing. How about that? You betcha. 222 co-sponsors. With me, it's 223. Now, in Texas, that's a deer rifle. 223, just so y'all know, okay? Well, listen, it's great to be with y'all to celebrate this incredible milestone. And guess what? 223 of us, we ain't done yet. We're going to get more co-sponsors. You bet. You betcha. That's a majority, and a bipartisan majority, too, so we're so excited about that. You know, really, this is an incredibly powerful testament to the commitment, to the collective commitment of y'all and Congress standing up against tyranny and saying, look, we support the brave people of Iran. We've had enough. Have y'all had enough? We've had enough. We're going to keep fighting with them, fighting with y'all for their freedom. Today, I want to address the hypocrisy of the Iranian regime, led by men who wrap themselves in the vestments of God, claiming to be the religious leaders of an Islamic republic. Nothing could be further than the truth. Can I get a witness? Y'all agree? Come on, I got to get y'all lined up here. These tyrants' actions say otherwise. They're frauds, they're fakes, they're murderers, they're killers. Other than that, they're pretty good people, I guess. I mean, it's sad. It's not a joke, but it's so sad. It's so stupid. In reality, they perpetuate a regime of terror and oppression, systematically violating human rights executing political dissidents, and suppressing ethnic and religious minorities. That doesn't sound like it's very godlike to me. How about to y'all? No way. They're frauds. The Iranian regime has proven time and time again that their righteous smokescreen is nothing but that, a smokescreen. They support extremist proxy groups. They orchestrate terror attacks. They use hostage diplomacy as tools of their violent agenda. Their so-called divine mission is a cover for their self-serving pursuit of power and absolute control. Got to be stopped. All of this in complete disregard for the values that they purport to uphold, which is a joke. We are not fooled. I'm not fooled by their false claims of piety, are y'all? No way, no way. And we want the world to not be fooled by their false claims of piety. We must support the Iranian people in their quest for a free and democratic Iran and hold the regime accountable for its egregious hypocrisy and all the violations. You know them all: murder, torture, imprisonment. Unbelievably. It is high past time for us to stand firmly for justice, for freedom, and human dignity, and that means for the people of Iran. So, now come on, y'all are cutting into my time here. They said 5 minutes. I'm probably going to go. Y'all okay if I go over 5 minutes? Okay, all right. Together here in Congress, we are championing the cause of a free Iran, and we absolutely reject the tyranny that masquerades as some kind of divine authority. Nothing could be further than the truth. Let's talk about House Resolution 1148 for just a second. I want to lay out a few things that our resolution does. And by the way, when I say our resolution, that means y'all's and Congress's too, because y'all have been instrumental in helping with. So give yourselves a hand, would you? First off, our resolution would unequivocally condemn the Iranian regime's actions in the Middle East, particularly those leading up to and especially since October 7th, 2023. I mean, this is unbelievable. It cannot be allowed to go on. Next, we call for the Iranian regime, holding the Iranian regime accountable for its actions through the continued imposition of sanctions. We've got to get sanctions back on Iran, hold them accountable, and shut down the money they're using to export terrorism. You bet. And more specifically, our resolution supports the 10-point plan for the future of Iran, put forth by the resistance, of course. Please, and by the way, y'all please join me in giving Maryam Rajavi a hand. Would y'all please join me in that? She's been an outstanding leader, especially in developing that 10-point plan. As y'all follow her, we're following and we're watching with a lot of anticipation to see we got to get this done sooner rather than later. Furthermore, not only do we want to do that, but we want the free world to recognize that the people of Iran have been stripped of all their fundamental rights and passed for political change. And I would even say this: what they do to some of the women, some of the guys, some of the women is unbelievable, barbarian. It is unbelievable. They need to be held accountable. They need to be driven. In Texas, we say driven out of town on a rail. They need to be imprisoned. They need to be held accountable for all the, I'd call them war crimes that they're doing. It's exactly what we need to do. So within the framework of international law and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, your resolution, our resolution, calls upon the world to recognize the rights of the Iranian people, the rights of the protesters, and the resistant units to confront the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, and other repressive forces to bring about change. If we can get those repressive forces, especially the Guard, if we can get them minimalized, we can start to bring about change. Lastly, Your resolution, our resolution, and perhaps most importantly, we recognize the rights of the Iranian people and their struggle to establish a democratic, a secular, and a non-nuclear Republic of Iran. You bet. So let's, pardon me, excuse me, let's be clear. When it comes to the truly religious, I know that there are peace-loving Muslims who do not support the Iranians or the Iran's regime's actions. We know that. We absolutely understand that. They all want what we want. They all want what we want. Peace, stability, and the right to live without the fear of oppression. Is that too much to ask? Not at all. But unfortunately, our peace-loving Muslims are being persecuted by a regime that calls us, as in U.S., the great Satan. Y'all have heard that, right? But here's the truth. The current regime is the absolute embodiment of evil. I can't think of any other force, if you want to, I mean, do we want to call it a government? Hardly. Any other regime that does the kind of brutality they do. It's the embodiment of evil, as I said. Their brutality betrays their true nature as the henchmen of Satan. Now, they call us Satan. Let me tell you something. They are the embodiment of the devil and of evil. You know, I've always wondered, there's an old saying in Texas, that's nothing but pure evil. And I'm thinking, how can evil be pure, you know? And I watch what they're doing, I'm thinking, that's evil. I wouldn't call it pure evil, vile even, what evil is what the regime is doing. So let me just say in closing that I have absolute, complete faith that we're standing, y'all are standing, we're all standing on the right side of history. We are in the right place for such a time as this. And I'm honored to be here standing with you. I'm honored that y'all have put forth the work to help a lot of my colleagues understand what's going on, to get them to sign up on this resolution. I'm honored that y'all, too, stand in the gap for our Iranian friends who are over there under the gun and being persecuted, raped, and tortured, some of them killed, put in prison without cause. So I want to say thank y'all. I can't tell you how much I appreciate y'all, your willingness to stand in that gap and to fight for what's right. God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Congressman Weber. Our next member of Congress, someone who has been with us for years, someone who has advocated on the issue of human rights, women's rights, and has stood shoulder by shoulder with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee. Please welcome Congresswoman Judy Chu.
Hello, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu, and I have to say I was so touched when I heard that you were doing this briefing and that you were dedicating it to the memory of Sheila Jackson-Lee, my colleague. I think she would have been so touched also by your love and affection and respect. And so I wanted to say a few words myself about her. I was so devastated to hear of her passing after this battle with cancer. She's been my colleague since I first came to Congress in 2009, and we even served together on the Judiciary Committee for many years. She was such a dedicated public servant who was responsible for creating the Juneteenth federal holiday, finally recognizing the end of slavery in the United States, and leading the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, and always standing up for the most vulnerable amongst us. And of course, she was such an incredible champion for human rights and democracy in Iran and all over the world. She made, yes. I know that she meant so much to the Iranian American community. She made sure that members of Congress really understood the level of oppression that the Iranian people experienced, from the 1988 massacre to the protests that shocked the country after Mahsa Amini's killing. She even chaired the Iranian Women Caucus and introduced a resolution last year condemning the Iranian regime's tacit support for the unconscionable poisoning of schoolgirls. Because of her leadership, she will continue to be an inspiration to all, and to me as I continue to work in Congress to stand up for human rights, peace, and democracy in Iran and throughout the world. And I'm so proud to stand with you and Iranian Americans to make sure that more members of Congress understand what's happening on the ground in Iran and how elected officials here in the United States can help bring the Iranian people closer to freedom. So thank you for organizing this incredible tribute as well as this briefing and giving me the opportunity to participate. I look forward to our continued work together.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Judy Chu. Our next member of Congress, also a sponsor of House Resolution 1148, is joining us from Oregon. I am going to be introducing Congresswoman Val Hoyle, but before I do that, I do want to invite her to the tribute table that we have set up for Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee. Please join us. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Congresswoman Val Hoyle. Thank you so much.
So I want to say thank you first for honoring our colleague who was just a fierce proponent of freedom and for human rights and civil rights and women's rights. And we were all so very shocked and devastated to hear of her loss, and it went so quickly. But what we have heard since then, you know, my family came here, they came from Ireland, and in our culture, when people die, what you do is you celebrate their life. And the celebrations of her life have been profound as people come up and speak about what impact she had, and in ways that we never knew. Because every single day she got up to fight for what she believed was right and to be a voice for those people who didn't have one. And then for the Iranian people, for the women in Iran, she was a tireless advocate. So I want to thank you for that and for honoring her. And I want to thank you for letting me address you here today. I did sponsor the resolution, but I feel like what I did was small. All I had to do was put my name on a resolution that said that the people of Iran should be able to have a voice in democracy, that you should have the right to freedom, that you should have the rights that my family came here to have, which is the right to practice your religion or no religion at all if that is your choice, that you should have the right to live in freedom, right, without fear of repression or death or prison, that women should have the rights that they always had. Iran has such a rich and amazing culture, and religious fundamentalism has taken that away. And as we have seen throughout the world, Iran has sponsored terrorism and hate, and the Iranians I know That is not what they want, and if the people of Iran had the right to vote and participate in democracy, this is not what they would want. And this is not what I want the people of America to know about Iran, because I know too many of you who are brave. And that's what I think about when I walked up here today. I thought, what can I say to you when there are so many people that are doing so much and standing up and putting their lives on the line, their families' lives on the line, to speak up and resist and be part of that resistance. So it is imperative for the safety and security of our world that we ensure that the voices of the Iranian people are heard, that religious fundamentalism is not allowed to be pursued, that we keep the security of the world in mind in everything we do, that we ensure Iran does not get a hold of a nuclear bomb, because we know they will use it, because we know the leadership of Iran, which again does not represent the people, has ill will towards those of us that believe in democracy. Right. So for me, I feel like I did a small thing, but know that in a bipartisan way, that the people in the U.S. Congress, that the women in the U.S. Congress support you, appreciate you, and understand the great risk that you're taking every day to step up. And whatever I can do, whatever we can do, know that we'll be here to support you and have your back and fight as long as we have to make sure that people have the right to democracy and having a voice. And again, taking out leadership that does not represent the good hearts and minds and culture of the Iranian people. So thank you again for everything that you do, and thank you for what you've done for Sheila Jackson-Lee.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. You spoke about women of Congress standing with the Iranian people, and you spoke about doing the small thing in supporting the House Resolution 1148, but the very small thing is going to facilitate the very change agents in the Iran's street, and this is the women and girls who are going to be standing up and are joining the resistance unit to bring about change. So with that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, a member of Iranian American community, founder of Organization of Iranian American Communities, professional chapter, and it's very fitting to have her address our event today to talk to us about how do Iranian women and girls view the recent event and the election or the selection of Iran's new president, Pezeshkian. Please welcome Dr. Azadeh Sami.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Azadeh Sami, and as a physician, a woman, and a staunch advocate for human rights and freedom, I stand before you today to shed light on Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian. Let me begin by saying to those who are trying to portray him as a reformist within the regime's political landscape, please check your facts. This figure, Masoud Pezeshkian, is no champion of progress or equality. Instead, he's a key player in the same oppressive, misogynistic construct that has subjugated Iranian women for decades. To be specific, from the very beginning of his career, he has been an active participant in enforcing the regime's anti-women agenda. His first major act, dating back to 1979, before I was born, was the imposition of compulsory veiling on female medical students. This directive was not about religious devotion, but about control. It was about imposing an ideological straitjacket on women who sought to contribute to society through medicine. Pezeshkian, alongside other state officials, gave women a mere 10 days to comply, proudly announcing this directive even before the mandatory hijab policy was even officially introduced nationwide. As a physician, I can attest to the profound impact such policies have had on the lives of Iranian women, especially those in the medical profession. Pezeshkian has played a direct role in putting the lives of Iranian women and girls under constant surveillance to serve his supreme leader. The death of Mahsa Amini in 2022 is a reminder that any deviation from the imposed dress code could result in severe consequences. Pezeshkian's alignment with the supreme leader's oppressive stance did not stop there. Throughout his career, he has consistently supported measures that have reinforced the subjugation of women. In 2017, during a televised interview, he unabashedly recalled his role in enforcing these draconian measures. He spoke proudly of purging universities and hospitals of unveiled women, revealing his deep commitment to the supreme leader's anti-women agenda. Now you tell me, what is the difference between him or the IRGC thugs, morality police who are harassing women in Iran on a daily basis? Let me share with you what his reaction was to the tragic death of Mahsa Amini at the hands of the morality police that shocked the world. Rather than condemning this atrocity, he deflected blame onto the women and protesters, accusing them of insufficient education and non-compliance with the supreme leader's agenda. He called for transparency, but only to further entrench the oppressive narrative and inhumane control. He is on the record saying women should be in a position where they can play a constructive role. The translation? Urging female morality police to elevate their oppression of any women and girls who take part in the anti-regime protests or who have joined the brave resistance units across Iran. It means urging IRGC thugs to kill young girls like Nika, torture political prisoners or rape girls right before the night of their execution, as reported by Amnesty International. Let's be very clear. Pezeshkian's political career has been consistently marked by his support for the regime's oppressive policies. His tenure was riddled with controversy, including impeachment issues related to mafia-style control over public access to medicine, causing superficial shortages, imposing medical tariffs, and elaborate foreign trips. One can say that he fits right in with the rest of the IRGC commanders and regime officials. From 2008 to 2024, Pezeshkian served as a parliamentary representative for Tabriz, Azarshah, and Osku. In the 10th parliamentary term, he was elected as the first deputy speaker, representing the Prudence and Hope faction aligned with then-President Hassan Rouhani. These positions allowed him to further cement his influence within the regime, consistently supporting the policies that oppress women and limit their freedoms. So this brings us to one of the key questions that is the topic of today's event. Will Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei change course with the new president? The short answer to this question is a resounding no. Khamenei will use his new president as a tool for oppression, aggression, and terrorism. So how can the U.S. policy support a non-nuclear, secular Iranian republic? The policy recommendations that we presented on behalf of OIAC back in May still stand. The United States must adopt a comprehensive policy strategy based on, number one, targeted sanctions enforcement against Iranian officials responsible for human rights abuses, including the arrest, torture, and execution of protesters, including women and girls. Specifically, the United States must blacklist Masoud Pezeshkian as a key figure in oppression of women, girls, and his role and alignment with the Supreme Leader and IRGC. With the Maximum Pressure Act and the 21st Century Peace Through Strength Act in place, the White House has more tools at its disposal for comprehensive sanctions against Ali Khamenei, the Supreme Leader, and now Pezeshkian, the new president, and their affiliated offices for human rights violations and support for terrorism. Number two, recognizing the rights of the Iranian people and their struggle to establish a democratic, secular, non-nuclear Republic of Iran. This is what the Bipartisan House Resolution 1148, which earned the absolute majority, recently calls for. Number three, publicly recognizing the right of self-defense of the Iranian people, especially women and girls, and the resistance units to fight for their freedom in accordance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Number four, recognizing the right of the Iranian people, especially women and girls, the protesters and the resistance units to confront the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and repressive forces to bring about change within the framework of the international law and Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Ladies and gentlemen, as we look to the future, it is crucial that we reject the false narratives presenting Iran's new president, Pezeshkian. We must stand in solidarity with the brave women of Iran who fight daily for freedom, and their courage and resilience will bring about true change that ushers a non-nuclear, secular republic in Iran. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sami, and thank you for outlining the policy recommendations that were presented by OIAC back in May, which still holds, and in fact holds no matter who's in the White House. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our next member of Congress, Congressman Gabby Emo. Please welcome Congressman Emo.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am grateful to be here with you. I am a newer member of Congress, having been elected in November of 2023 to replace David Cicilline in Rhode Island's 1st Congressional District. And it is an honor of mine to serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and serve on the subcommittee of the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia. I certainly want to acknowledge the great work of our organizers here, the Organization of Iranian American Communities. Let's hear it for the group. And that recognition is a thank you for being here today to be part of this collective effort, bipartisan effort to show support for a free, peaceful, secular, and democratic Iran. And that's an Iran where everyone is safe and free to work and to worship as they choose. We know that this is not our only wish, but the wish of the Iranian people, struggling under the repression of the Iranian regime. That's why I am proud to join my colleagues in co-sponsoring Representative Weber's resolution condemning the Iranian regime. We know that the regime is a threat to Iranian citizens, their neighbors, and of course, peace throughout the world. The regime is willing to oppress, kidnap, torture, murder their own people in order to remain and maintain complete and absolute power. The regime is funding terrorist groups across the region to destabilize the Middle East. They thrive in chaos. They thrive in chaos. So we know that they have funded the instability that we've seen throughout the region, an instability that has brought in so much pain, so much loss for so many. We know that even to the battle for democracy in Ukraine, the regime sells drones to Russia and has broken and attempted to break a people who have remained resilient. So we must do all we can to condemn the Iranian regime and prevent them from spreading that continued chaos, that continued destruction. But equally as important, we must also recognize the Iranian people's desire for freedom, especially for women and girls, especially for women and girls. Ever since the senseless murder of Mahsa Amini by the so-called morality police, the Iranian people have protested for their freedom. The bravery of the Iranian people to stand up to the regime, to risk their lives for freedom, is nothing short of inspiring. So we must use every diplomatic tool available to support the Iranian people in their fight for freedom and push for a peaceful, safe, and democratic Iran. So I end where I began, with gratitude. Gratitude for all the work that has been done, all of the work that's ahead, all of the work that we will continue to do together to ensure that the Iranian people experience the heights of their aspirations and enjoy a freedom that we all cherish. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Congressman. You spoke of chaos, absolutely, and now we know with this House Resolution 1148, there is an alternative, there is a solution to that chaos. So thank you again. Our next member of Congress is well known to all of us, someone who stood on the issue of human rights, democracy, the defense of the Iranian resistance in reversing the wrongful designation, as well as the defense and the rights of Ashraf III. Please welcome none other than Congressman Brad Sherman.
Hello, I'm Brad Sherman from California's best named city, Sherman Oaks. I'm with my daughter Molly, who also is from America's best named city, Molly Sherman. And I have been with you for my 28 years in Congress, working with the Organization of Iranian American Communities and the National Council of Resistance of Iran. And I want to take a minute to remember one of our allies and friends, my colleague Sheila Jackson-Lee, who passed on a couple days ago. Many of you have been to many of these events where we heard from Sheila Jackson-Lee. And I'm sure that she's up there beseeching God directly for human rights on this planet, for justice, and for the people of Iran. The Iranian people most recently have risen up as a result of the brutal murder of Mahsa Amini by the so-called morality police. And the regime has intensified its abuses since then. The issue was highlighted in April when the regime sentenced dissident rapper Tumaj, my pronunciation is Salini, to death. On June 5th, I led a dozen of my colleagues in a letter to President Biden urging the United States to advocate for the reversal of that incredibly unjust sentence and to sanction the regime's judges responsible for that sentence. Thankfully, domestic and international outrage over that death sentence has forced the regime to overturn it. But we must continue to call for the release of Iran's brave dissidents who have been fighting this regime in the hope that one day the people of Iran, the people who gave us the world's first human rights document, will be able to live in peace and to live in a country where we have the rule of law and democracy. We see that 2 students were jailed by the regime just this month for posting a simple photo of Tumaj what? Salim. I was just going to call him by his first name and avoid having to pronounce the name I might get right and I might get wrong. But this level of brutal repression is not something new for people in this room. We saw Ibrahim Raisi, who died in a plane crash, and we saw something rather disgusting. The Security Council of the United Nations having a minute of silence for the butcher of Tehran. I went to the floor of the House of the United States and led the House in a minute of silence for all of the victims of Raisi's brutality, including the 30,000 Iranian political prisoners who were tortured and murdered by death squads that Raisi led in 1988, and the 1,500 Iranian protesters murdered in 2019 in the bloody November crackdowns. I've worked with many of you on first House Resolution 100 with my friend and fellow Californian Tom McClintock, which calls for a democratic, secular, non-nuclear Republic of Iran and condemns the human rights violations. And it speaks favorably of Maryam Rajavi's 10-point plan for the future of Iran. That resolution has 243 bipartisan co-sponsors. We have now focused on House Resolution 1148, condemning the regime's terrorism, its proxy wars, its internal repression, and I've enjoyed working with Congressman Randy Weber, and we now have 222 bipartisan co-sponsors. Last year, I led a letter with a dozen of our colleagues in response to the June 2023 raid on the Ashraf 3 compound. That letter urged that the residents of Ashraf 3 be respected. I have led a letter to 33 of our colleagues to Secretary Blinken, expressing concern over the terrorist threats by the Iranian regime targeting Iranian dissidents abroad, including the cyber attack in Albania. And the letter requests that the State Department work with Albania to assure the safety of Ashraf 3. And this highlights something. You know, a lot of people understand the evil of this regime. They look at the Houthi, who have not only killed as many Israeli civilians as they can, unfortunately, due to Iron Dome, not that many, but what have the Houthi done that doesn't get reported? They have strangled the Red Sea. So food shipments from Russia and Ukraine now cost more in Ethiopia and Bangladesh. And people who used to get 3 meals a day are now getting 2 meals a day. And talk to any medical statistician, those people are dying at a higher rate. How many thousands of people have the Houthi killed? We see Hezbollah. We see Hamas, which is now, I just got out of another event holding Americans hostage, but that isn't new. This regime held our diplomats hostage for hundreds of days. There was a false report that Jimmy Carter had passed today. Fortunately, that I believe is a false report, but we remember what they did during the Carter administration, how they held all of America hostage by holding our diplomats. But so many people since the beginning of this regime are aware of how evil it is. What they may not understand is a great honor that many people in this room have. Because you ask yourself, who does the regime hate the most? Because if you want to know a man, know him by his enemies. So who does, well, obviously they hate Israel. Obviously they hate America. But who do they use their own agents to kill everywhere around the world? The MEK. This is the organization that they are willing to violate every international law to try to go after. Whether it's in Albania or South America or Europe or Brussels or the United States. Why is that? Well, there is no better testimony to the effective advocacy against this regime than when the regime strikes out. And I certainly appreciate what the MEK has done to organize Iranian dissidents around the world, to organize people around the world, to work for a democratic, secular Republic of Iran, and a non-nuclear Iran, an Iran that will be promoting human rights and will not be a threat in the region or in the world. So I could go on longer. Many of you have heard me go on longer. But I'll try to wrap this up relatively quickly. The countless acts of brutality by this regime against its people and against the world and against hungry people from Ethiopia to Bangladesh, and when you count what the Houthi are doing, has caused people to take to the streets, screaming death to the dictator again and again. People in my district, I believe I represent more Iranian Americans than any other member of Congress, thanks to the gods of redistricting. Tehran Angeles is in the 32nd Congressional District. So it may take us a while, but I look forward to visiting a non-nuclear, democratic, free ally of the United States someday in Tehran. So thanks for putting this on. I have been, I believe, at every one of your meetings of this sort in the Capitol. I am always there when you have the event within 1,000 miles of where I am. And when it's more than 1,000 miles, I make a video. So I am there in spirit 100% of the time and look forward to doing that for another 28 years. I'm Brad Sherman. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Congressman Sherman. You spoke about the role of the MEK in exposing the Iranian regime and how the Iranian regime really goes above and beyond using its embassies, using its ambassadors and deputy ambassadors to commit and conduct terrorist plot against the MEK members, no matter where they are. I venture to say Iranian regime considers the MEK as their existential threat. So we really do appreciate your support and your continued support on the issue of democracy and human rights in Iran. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our next member of Congress, Congressman Grothman. Please welcome Congressman Grothman.
I'd like to thank you all for being here. I think it is important that we keep reminding the Iranian regime that they are outcasts in the international community, right? We know why people come to the United States. It's a free country. It's based on the rule of law. It is not a country in which people can go after people in the country or outside of the country, punish them without really breaking any legitimate law. And I think the more we spread the news around the globe, what is possible, as well as spread the news what we see in America, it hopefully puts more pressure on the people in Iran to change or to bring in a whole new government, correct? I am an original co-sponsor of something called House Resolution 1148, and I want to read some of it at this time. It's crucial to understand the time has come for Iranian regime to be held accountable. The strategy the Supreme Leader has laid out to evade the Iranian people uprising and preserve the regime is now crumbling and falling apart. We urge our ally, the government of Albania, to ensure the safety, full protection, and well-being of the Iranian political refugees in Ashraf 3 in Albania, providing and protecting internationally enshrined rights, including the right to life, liberty, and security, and protection of property, as well as freedom of expression and assembly. In 2023, the Iranian regime started sham trials in absentia of 104 veteran members of the Iranian Resistance, who are primarily based in Europe, including in France and Albania, to create a phony legal precedent against them and have them extradited to Iran or justify terror plots against them. H-Res 1148 calls for holding the Iranian regime accountable for its actions through the continued imposition of sanctions and to support the Iranian Resistance's 10-point plan for the future of Iran, offered by Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, the president-elect of the principal opposition, the National Council of Resistance of Iran. We condemn the executions of as many as 30,000 political prisoners during the 1988 massacre, which were carried out under the fatwa by then Supreme Leader Ruhollah Khomeini to speedily kill all political prisoners who remained loyal to the main movement in the Iranian Resistance, MEK, with subsequent death commissions established on July 19, 1988, with express purpose of carrying out a fatwa. I guess I'm supposed to leave here today with some marching orders or something. And that is, I have to say, do not give up. And we have to do all we can to make sure the Iranian people know that the vast majority of people in the civilized world are supportive of them. And the current regime in Iran has to know that, well, maybe they feel good about themselves. The vast number of civilized people around the world hold them in contempt. And they have the power to begin a new Iran, Iran based on freedom, Iran in which nobody has to go home worried about the knock on the door or the sham trial, and no one has to worry about speaking whatever they say, right? We have to set that up as the goal of people around the globe and speak positively about countries that do share those values and condemn those countries that don't. In any event, I'd like to thank you all for getting together here today. I know you have an impact on members of Congress when you come around, when you show up at your constituent, to show up to see your individual congressman. So I'd like to thank you all for being here today, and good luck in meeting as many American congressmen as you can. Thank you.
Congressman, thank you so much. And your marching order of never giving up reminded me of late Sheila Jackson-Lee, who used to, every time she joined us, she would talk about never give up, never give in. And this has been our marching order in the last 4 decades in defense of human rights, democracy for the people of Iran. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, our congressional briefing today combines the message of U.S. Congress as it was delivered by the members who have joined us so far, and citing the various language from the paragraphs from the House Resolution 1148, as well as input from our Iranian American experts to provide us the context, to provide us a better understanding on what, not just what's happening inside U.S. Congress, but also what's happening in Iran today. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is a surgeon scientist, also an author, but more importantly, he's a former political prisoner who has seen the horrors of this regime from the prisons. And he's here today to share with us his perspective on what Iran's new president stands for and what should the U.S. Administration do with the changes that's happened in Iran since the death of Ebrahim Raisi. Please welcome Dr. Firuz Daneshgari.
Good afternoon by now, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Firuz Daneshgari. Thank you, Dr. Severrat. I actually came here today from Ohio to share with you a very personal story that somehow connects me, my life, my family's life, with the current president-elect of Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian. So in contrast to former Speaker Dr. Sami, who wasn't born in '79, I was alive in '79. And really, I want to kind of draw for you a parallel path that my life as a person who went to medical school in 1970s, very similar to Pezeshkian, who went to medical school, to today. So in late 70s, I was accepted to all the medical schools in Iran, including University of Tabriz and University of Tehran. My hometown, my parents' hometown is Tabriz. Those of us who speak Farsi, they pick up from my Turkish accent. But we were living in Tehran. So I went to University of Tehran, starting the medical school at the same time when Masoud Pezeshkian went to University of Tabriz. So right after revolution, during the first year or so, as you all know, Khomeini started shutting down the universities because he could not tolerate the freedom of speech, students like me in our early teens. And the division of the students in the universities became very apparent. Majority, very much like the recent election, over 90% of the students, of course, they chose to be pre-democracy, pro-freedom. And the minorities, such as Pezeshkian, turned out to be what we call them phalange. We call them chomagdar. In the English language, we call them thugs and hoodlums. We call them club wielders, because that is exactly what they did. When they came to classes, they want to shut down the classes. They basically wielded their clubs, and they hit people, they killed people, they arrested people. And that is not where it stopped. After 1980-81, I was arrested, as Dr. Ramesh said. I was arrested, severely tortured in Evin prison, and people like Pezeshkian were the one who identified people like me on the street and made us to get arrested. Not only that, they came to prison, identified and helped the torturers to get information. And I have personal information, not about Pezeshkian, but other people who have reached to his rank, that they had to execute few prisoners to prove that they are pro-Khomeini. So I know of my other classmates who have done the death shot to prove that they were pro-Khomeini. And Pezeshkian, without any doubt, is among that group. So if I have attracted your attention with my personal story, I really have a personal thing to establish here. And that is, my request is to blacklist Pezeshkian, very similar to the rest of the thugs that are running that Iranian government. As Congressman Sherman said, these are the faces of evil. The face of Khomeini didn't bring this death and misery to my country on his own hand. It brought through people like Pezeshkian. So again, in 1970s, I go to medical school. He goes to medical school. I know, again, that Tabriz is my hometown, my parents' hometown. When they shut down the university, Pezeshkian had an office in the first floor of one of the hospitals. identifying the students who needed to be boycotted and be executed or arrested. And as a result, ladies and gentlemen, half of my classmates have been executed or killed by this barbaric regime. So I'm going to carry a parallel again. I was arrested in 1980, severely tortured. My family and I escaped Iran before I finished my training. The same time, Pezeshkian goes to medical school, finishes his medical school in University of Tabriz in 1985. And he supposedly goes and completes a training in surgery and cardiovascular training. But let me actually draw a parallel here. So from 1990s, he participated in late 80s, participated as a part of the IRGC, as a part of the Sepah, wore the uniform of the IRGC, participated in the Iran-Iraq war, both as a pro-regime and as a medical student physician. In 1999, Pezeshkian participated and sided with IRGC as they massacred the students across various campuses. As many of us know, there was a massive demonstration uprising at the university, and people like Pezeshkian, who were the students themselves in the universities, they're the one who would identify the activists and basically cause their arrest and their killing later. In 2003, Iranian-Canadian photojournalist Zahra Kazemi was arrested, tortured, raped, and eventually died. Very similar to what happened to Mahsa Amini in 2022. And Pezeshkian endorsed the regime's atrocity and used his medical expertise to lie to the world that the cause of the death for Kazemi's death was an intracranial hemorrhage based on a personal examination of her body. So these are the thugs, these are the killers, these are the ones who carry the dirty job of Khamenei and Khomeini. Make no mistake, he ain't the president. From 2008 until recently, he actively held various parliamentary causes. As you all know, in 2000, when Khatami was elected president, he became the Minister of Health. And as my colleague Dr. Sami said, he really started the mafia of the drug. That the epic of that was shown during the COVID pandemic. The mafia of drug basically withhold and control the distribution of all the medication in Iran, and they have enriched themselves, their families, and the groups of the IRGC. So Iran has the second largest mortality from COVID during the COVID pandemic, thanks to Pezeshkian and his co-workers. So since 2008 until recently, he has various parliamentary careers. His significant work was a member of the parliaments and deputy speaker during the 10th parliamentary term, demonstrated his influence and alignment with Hassan Rouhani, the former president. So there is no angle between Pezeshkian and Khamenei. He has supported the IRGC. He has supported various governments. In 2018, Pezeshkian proposed eliminating the presidency and replacing it with an executive deputy of the supreme leader. Just be the puppet of the supreme leader, the position that now he has. You know, he finally arrived at his wish. Suggesting the need for a unified command structure to address the economic wars initiated by U.S. In 2019, Pezeshkian chose silence over the massacre of 1,500 young protesters who were killed by IRGC in various cities of Iran, especially in Tehran. In 2020, in response to U.S. decision to designate the IRGC as a terrorist organization, Pezeshkian explicitly stated that his willingness to wear the IRGC uniform again, emphasizing the critical role of the IRGC in maintaining the national balance in Iran for suppression inside Iran and for exporting terrorism outside Iran. In 2020, during the nationwide uprising, Pezeshkian condemned the protesters and expressed concerns over damage to public properties, ignoring the loss of life of 3,000 Iranian citizens. In June of 2024, the same Guardian Council who rejected him in 2021, so his candidacy for presidency was rejected in 2021 by the Guardian Council. So it shows you, and then he was approved again in 24. It shows you that these are really the puppets. These are the puppets of Khamenei, and they basically picks them up depending on what function, what role he has. So make no mistake. Please don't be illusioned that this Pezeshkian represents anything but Khamenei and IRGC. So the critical question for all of us is Khamenei using this obscurity and kind of unknownness of a new president, Pezeshkian, to change course? Or the course of Iranian regime will stay the same as clashing with the people of Iran and the rest of the free world? That is the critical question for us. By just examining the first week of Pezeshkian's activities as a president-elect, he chose to meet Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. He chose to meet with Vladimir Putin, everyone knows him. He met with Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, and he met with Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas. So before he organizing his cabinet, finding out what is wrong inside Iran, what is it that people want, he wanted to go to his allies, right? The allies who are exporting terror and war across the world. So the question is there any difference between Ebrahim Raisi and Pezeshkian in the eyes of Iran's supreme leader? The answer is absolutely not. They're the same. He's using them to carry on his policies. Very much like Raisi, Pezeshkian is 100% committed to IRGC agenda. And let me read to you a direct quote from him. It says the defensive and deterrent power of the IRGC and the Iranian army have built a source of pride for our country. Or when he praises the IRGC's missile program and says one of the reasons other enemies, including U.S., cannot act against us, against IRGC, is precisely because of the capability of our drones and missiles. And you have seen a small example of the drone missile when they shot about 300 to Israel. Of course, when it comes to notorious Qasem Soleimani, the master killer, the master leader of the terror outside Iran, he said, I consider him a source of national pride and a thorn in the eyes of our enemies. So this brings me to why I came all the way from Ohio to share this personal story with you. So I hope I have drawn a clear picture that this is one of those thugs that basically has carried out the beating and the job of Khomeini and later by Khamenei. He's a puppet. Frankly, I question his clinical skills. The person who's basically functioned more in the IRGC and being on the street and probably taking care of their patients, I definitely won't go to him as a cardiac surgeon. And over the past 40 plus years, he has been nothing but the puppet of the Iranian regime to emphasize suppression inside Iran and export terrorism outside Iran. So this brings me to the main point that I came here, and that is to request the Congress of the United States and the administration to blacklist Pezeshkian. Please remove this guy He's a key player in supporting and furthering the regime's agenda, which includes activities considered by the U.S. State Department and the state sponsor of terrorism. As I mentioned you, he basically the very first week as the president-elect, he met with the leaders of terrorism, international terrorism. For instance, historically, the U.S. has imposed sometimes on the leaders of the country designated as the state sponsor of terrorism. North Korea, Syrian president, they have all been listed as the sponsors of terrorism. Pezeshkian's close ties with figures such as Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, and Ismail Haniyeh of the Hamas. Both organizations are designated as terrorist groups by the U.S., further underscores his alignment with the terrorist sponsoring activities and organizations. Let me close by saying that in the eyes of Iranian people, those who are present now and those of my classmates who are not among us, because I see them every day, there is no difference between Ali Khamenei, IRGC, or Pezeshkian. They're all the same cloth. They are all part of a brutal regime who's facing an inevitable downfall by people of Iran. So we, as the leaders of Iranian American, urge our government to do its part and blacklist Pezeshkian. Doing so would send a strong messaging that the U.S. remains committed to combating terrorism and holding Tehran's regime accountable for its ongoing human rights violations. America must stand with the people of Iran who are fighting for freedom daily, and I'm so proud that the bipartisan majority of U.S. Congress has already declared that in the House Resolution 1148. And I cannot close my comments by paying my due respect to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson, who had the honor of meeting her and taking a moment to remembering her memory with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Daneshgari, for presenting a very compelling case on why Masoud Pezeshkian, the Supreme Leader's new president, should be designated, just as IRGC and Khamenei himself have been designated by the State Department. Ladies and gentlemen, let me also share with you that our event today is not only conveying a very strong sense of U.S. Congress and the bipartisan support, House majority for House Resolution 1148, but it's also conveying a path forward. It's conveying a solution for all the problems that members of Congress and our Iranian speakers have presented today. At this point, I'd like to invite my colleague, Dr. Majid Sadiqpour, to share with us his perspective on the importance of this resolution and all the members who have joined us from which committee and the makeup of the signatories of House Resolution 1148. Please welcome Dr. Sadiqpour.
Thank you all for being here. I want to again also join the rest of the folks who spoke here today. Remembering Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee, she was a lioness for sure. And her memory lives in our hearts and minds, and certainly, hopefully, it rings in our actions going forward, both in supporting what's right inside this country, but also fighting for those who can't speak for themselves elsewhere in the world. Before I mention a few thoughts about House Resolution 1144, some of the speakers today spoke of the regime in Iran as being an evil entity. I think the free world has not yet gotten grasp, not sensed fully what this regime has done and continues to do to the Iranian people. And certainly we see the extension of that outside of Iran as well. But before I give you nuts and bolts of this resolution, I want to share a personal story. Evil in modern times is not sensed I was 13 years old in the streets of a small city in northern Iran. One morning, I walk outside in the street, and I see blood running from one of the houses. It's coming from my best friend's house. His name was Hassan. I did not know what it was and why it was. So I left, went back home. I got scared. A few hours later, I saw a lot of commotion inside that house. And then I went outside, peeked outside. There were lots going on. That day passed. It wasn't until some 20-plus years later, in a balcony in Boston, Massachusetts, that my mom told me what had happened that day. It was the first 2 years of the Ayatollahs, end of the second year, I believe. A young 17-year-old supporters of Fadayan Khalq. They were not the MEK members, they were communists. But they were secular, freedom-seeking people. A 17-year-old young lady happened to be a relative of my neighbor. And my relative, my best friend's father, was the eldest in the family. And hence, the body of a young woman was brought to that house for proper washing and burial, and future burial. She had been shot just minutes before, literally minutes before, because earlier that morning there were shots in our small town. She had been shot and killed. But why would there be so much blood? There were physicians who spoke today. A bloodshot, somebody dies, bleeds somewhat, but unless you're blown apart, you do not bleed as such. But why so much blood streaming down the street? So I asked my mom that question. She has long passed. She said they had taken out her liver while she was alive. Evil does not have arms and legs. My best friend's father was a supporter of the IRGC, actually carried a gun, Kalashnikov, every night home, hunted down MEK supporters until that day. He put their arms down, say goodbye to them, and say goodbye to his business too, because mullahs mafia no longer afforded him the business he needed. That said, the resolution before us, House Resolution 1144, the aim of this resolution is support the Iranian people's desire to end that evil. The Iranian people do not need money. The Iranian people do not need guns. They don't need America's weapons, but they do need the flag bearer of modern democracy. They need its political capital. So it's my honor to have worked on this resolution with all of you, most of you, to have 12 chairmen of this body be among the co-sponsors of this legislation. There are 27 plus members of the Foreign Affairs Committee who are co-sponsors of this legislation. There are 12 members of the Select Committee on Intelligence who have co-sponsored this resolution. And there are over 30 members of the House Armed Services Committee, and many, many more whose listing will take significant time. So I want to thank all of these leaders for their role in amplifying the voice of the people of Iran. And I want to thank every one of you for being here and helping elevate that voice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Majid. Thank you for sharing the story of the price for freedom in Iran. You heard members of Congress today referring to the House resolution, the issue of accountability, the issue of holding those accountable for gross human rights violations in Iran. I want to invite you to watch a video of an exhibition that we've had that really puts the crimes against humanity in an exhibition so that the world can see what this regime has done to the people of Iran. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the reason why the issue of accountability is center when it comes to the right policy on Iran. Clearly, the people of Iran are willing to pay the price for freedom. We just heard from our Iranian experts, Dr. Daneshgari, who has seen and witnessed the horrors and the crimes against humanity himself, outlining how Iran's new president, or I must say Ali Khamenei's new president, stands on a record decades of human rights violations and terrorism. There is no difference between Pezeshkian, Raisi, Khamenei, and IRGC. And that is the reason why it is very convincing when we say that Pezeshkian must be designated, just as the IRGC has been designated and just as Ali Khamenei has been blacklisted by the State Department. This is the ask of the Iranian people. When it comes to change in Iran, we know that the change comes from within. We've heard about the influence and the importance of the resistance units inside Iran. We also heard from our members of Congress today why it is important to recognize the rights of the Iranian people to self-defense and recognize why the people of Iran are going to bring about change that is going to stand on a non-nuclear secular republic. So with that, we are expecting probably a couple more members of Congress to join us, but I also want to invite another member of our community to join us and talk about their family story and how their family was impacted by this regime. Please help me welcome Ghulam Torshrizi from Iranian American Community of Maryland.
Thank you very much. All of us saw the pictures. For me, these are not just pictures. 3 of my brothers, they were victims of this regime. And I don't know how to start. I come from a family that we were 4 brothers and 3 sisters. And all of us, we were students. In 1976, I come to the United States. It was at the regime of the Shah. And my brothers, they were college students in Iran. And all of us, we were against the dictatorship of the Shah. And we wanted to have a new regime, to have democracy and freedom. And my brothers, they were fighting in Iran. And when the revolution happened, I went back to Iran to help to rebuild the country. But unfortunately, we call it the Spring of Freedom, didn't last that much. And what happened, the new regime, they established a new constitution. And the new constitution is exactly similar to the old constitution. It's a dictatorship. At that time, we had the Shah, and the Shah would elect the prime minister and bring it and introduce it to the people. Now we have the supreme leader, and instead of prime minister, we have a president. But this president, how is chosen is by a council that they say, okay, you are qualified to be running as a president. So obviously my brothers, they were against this, and they were members of Mujahideen Khalq, MEK. And Mujahideen did not vote for the new constitution. And they said this is leading to the dictatorship. And the difference between Mujahideen and other groups started from that point. They say that with this constitution, there is no path for freedom. And the regime is not shy about it. It has written in their constitution what they are all about. They are about to have the rule of God all over the world, not just Iran. And with this, what they do in Iran, if somebody is against the constitution, they are being captured and put in prison and dead. And for doing this outside the country, they have established proxy groups. So they go and bring the rule of God to other countries. So what happened? One day, one of my brothers disappeared. We did not know what happened to him. We were looking for him. After 17 days, in the official newspaper of Iran, Coherent, they wrote that Behruz Torshizi, my brother, has been executed. My father goes to the authorities and asks, why you killed my son? And the answer is shocking. They said that he was taking pictures of demonstration, and because of taking pictures, they put him in prison. And my other brother disappeared. We did not know what happened to him. My other brother is the third brother, Reza Torshizi. He went out with my mother to look for a refuge, to find a place to hide, and they were arrested. After 1 month, my mother was freed, and she came home with the sad news that my brother Bahman has been killed, and my brother Reza, that was with her, is sentenced to 7 years in prison. So my mother and my father, they go every day to visit Reza, but they would not give them permission to visit. They said, we do not have this person in. And my mother was crying and said, I know, I was with him. We are in prison together. They said, no, the name is not this. They were torturing my parents for 4.5 months until they say one day that, yes, we have Reza, he's in prison. After 7 years, it was the time that Reza be released. Ebrahim Raisi, he was the president, and he was the president, he was a member of the commission, death commission we call it, 4 people. They go to, my father goes to my brother and say, why you don't get released? My brother said, Dad, it's not that easy. They are asking me the impossible. They are telling me, in order to be released, you need to kill other prisoners to prove that you are one of us. I cannot do that. And they killed my brother. Dr. Daneshkari was saying that the same thing about this new president, Pezeshkian. He is a mass murderer in order to prove that he can be part of the system. The system in Islamic Republic is so brutal, and people who are with the system, they should show that they are with them by killing innocent people. I don't know, this is my story. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce our next member of Congress, an advocate of human rights, someone who stood with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee on our issues and on our cause. Please welcome Congressman Danny Davis.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. What a great display.
Well, thank you. Let me first of all commend you for your pursuit of freedom, democracy, and the ability to live life as one would see it. I also want to thank you for paying tribute to Representative Sheila Jackson-Lee, who was indeed a dear friend. Every time the Congressional Black Caucus lined up, I always lined up right behind Sheila. So anytime I was trying to figure out where I was supposed to be, all I'd have to do was find Sheila, and I know where my place was. I came here the term after she came. So in terms of seniority, she was one step ahead of me, and especially with the Congressional Black Caucus. But we also collaborated on many different subject matter things. Sheila was the most energetic person I've ever known in my life. I've known a lot of people. She was everywhere. She wrote and led many letters. She spoke on almost any and every issue that came up. She knew something about it. On a personal note, my grandson was killed one year in Chicago, murdered. He was 16 years old. I looked up at the funeral services, and there was Sheila. We collaborated on the Juneteenth effort, and of course the two of us were both on the stage when the president signed the proclamation making June 19th a national holiday. We worked closely together on child welfare issues, And of course, we worked closely on reentry, and that is the opportunity for individuals who have had prison records or other kind of records to have programs. We worked on something called the Second Chance Act, which I introduced, and we've had it passed for a number of years. That created over $1 billion into grant money for programs for individuals. So at my church, if we were having a service for Sheila, we'd probably say, if when you give the best of your service, telling the world that the Savior is come, be not dismayed when men don't believe you. Pick up the cross and run swiftly to him. He'll understand and say, well done, Sister Sheila Jackson-Lee. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
How beautifully said. Well done, Sheila. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and I want to thank all of our speakers, our members of Congress, as we looked at what House Resolution 1148 and the path forward for change in Iran would look like. So thank you again, and have a wonderful afternoon.